Hey everyone, welcome again to Indian Story Read Along. Today's story was a special request from someone who has emailed us, and I had to go digging through. This is such an old book. I was like 5 years old when I got it, and I scribbled in parts of it. But Amar Chitra Katha, as you can see there in the corner, they don't actually make this book anymore because all of these images are like their old style of doing artwork. And if they do publish it, I believe that all the inside illustrations are the same. But this is like super old. This is a really old style of them doing it. So today's story is going to be called The Merchant and the Servant. Let's get started. Here we are, a merchant and a king's servant. Once upon a time, in a city called Vardhamana, so all the townspeople there are talking. So one guy is saying to another one, once again, Dantila has proved himself to be an excellent administrator. So back in the day when there were kings and queens and no government other than kings, there was always some kind of a prime minister, like an advisor, the guy who took care of all of the king's daily tasks, like his schedule and making sure that the city was clean, everyone had food, and that person was either called a prime minister or an administrator. So another guy is saying he is wise and good too. While the people were praising him, Dantila was busy talking with his wife about their daughter's wedding. So he says to her, I have invited the king, the queen, and the entire court for the wedding. And then she says, we better start the preparations. There are hardly a few days left. So on the wedding day, there you see the queen who's sitting there beside the king, and they're all kind of hanging out. This is different. Like, they have cushions everywhere. It's different than how we do weddings nowadays. So he says to the king, Dantila says to the king, welcome, O king. I am highly honored by your presence today. So Goramba, the king's sweeper, came to the wedding too, but uninvited. Dantala was furious. Get out, Goramba! How dare you come here? Now, Goramba is kind of upset now. He says, I'll get even with him somehow. The whole of that night, he thought about it. At last, just before sunrise, I've got it! You see that little light bulb moment. That morning when Goramba went to sweep the king's chamber, there's the king still asleep in his bed, half asleep, just kind of groggily getting up. And then Goramba says, shame on Dantala! How dare he embrace the queen? So he says that, okay, Dantala and the queen have something going on. He's just kind of talking to himself. So then the king jumps out of bed, understandably, and he says, Goramba, what were you saying? Tell me at once. Is this true? And he's on his knees, drops his broom. He's on his knees. Master, please. I was gambling all night. Now I'm half asleep and I don't know what I'm saying. So he's saying, I had a late night. I came into work. I'm kind of like, I don't know what I'm talking about. You know, it was a mistake. So isn't that interesting? What he did is he kind of dropped an idea and then took it back right away. But then this idea is already planted in the king's head. And so he's starting to think about it now. So now he's upset and goes, Goramba, he's thinking, Goramba moves freely in the palace. And maybe he really saw it happen. So then the king dressed up and he sent for his chief guard. And he says, henceforth, that means from now on, going forward, Dantila shall not enter the palace gates. And the chief guard says, yes, your majesty. So there, the next day, Dantila wanted to meet the king. But those two guards, here and here, they're standing in his way. And then he goes, what? Why? But I... And the chief guard says, sorry, you may not enter the king's orders. And then there you see Goramba in the background sweeping, and he says, ha 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 ha. That's really, really cool how a mere sweeper has that much power over someone who is like second to the king in the entire kingdom. And so then Dantila is thinking about it, and he thinks back to the wedding, and he thinks, oh man, you know what? He wasn't causing any trouble. I should have just let him stay. Instead, I kicked him out because I thought I was so important and he's just a sweeper. This is why it's very, very important that no matter what your job is, no matter what someone else's job is, you treat them kindly. So now he's thinking, now I know who caused the trouble. A king's servant, high or low, must indeed be respected. That very evening, Dantila invited Goramba to his home. So he has to backtrack now. He has to make nice. And he says to him, my friend, please accept these gifts and forgive me for my behavior that day. He doesn't know what Goramba said. He doesn't know anything about him saying, oh, you know, I saw him with the queen. And he doesn't know any of that, but he does know. He's smart enough to realize that Goramba was the cause of him not being able to enter the palace. And he figured it out. And it doesn't matter what it is he said. He just has to kind of make everything good again. So then Goramba says to him, thank you, sir. Thank you. As if he doesn't know what happened either. And he goes, I forgive you. And you will see again how clever I can be. So how is he going to do takesies backsies on this whole Dantila and the queen thing? The next morning, Goramba was sweeping the king's room as usual. And he's laughing to himself. Ha ha ha! Our king... This is really funny. Our king eats cucumbers in the lavatory. Imagine all the things you could say. But okay, this is what he comes up with. Our king eats cucumbers in the lavatory. And before, the king didn't know whether it was a lie or not about Dantila and the queen. He knows this is a lie. He jumps out and goes, that's a lie, Goramba. I could hang you for it. There, Goramba is, he knew what was going to happen. The king would leap out of bed and then yell at him for it. And then he says the same thing that he said before. He says it again. Please, master, I was gambling all night. Now I'm half asleep. I don't know what I'm saying. Please forgive me. And then the king is thinking, he has made a mistake about me, so he could be wrong about Dantila too. I must make up with the able Dantila. Isn't that something? This guy is super bright. So first he put that doubt in the king's mind, and then he found a way to remove it completely. So then everything's good. Everyone's friends again. The king says to Dantila, Dantila, my dear friend, accept these gifts as a token of my regard for you. You are reappointed to your former position and may enter the palace at will. And then Dantila says, thank you, your majesty. Now he's back to work. So every Panchatantra story always has a moral, meaning that this is what they want you to take away from the story after you finish reading it. Moral, every dog has its day. I would think maybe it's a, yeah, that kind of makes sense, I suppose. But I would think maybe treat everyone with respect. That means that the people who are cleaning up your school are just as important as your teachers and just as important as your principal. The school would shut down without them. Same way, the palace would shut down without anyone cleaning it like Goramba, and people like Dantila there, being the prime minister, wouldn't be able to get to their job, as you saw. So please join us again next time for Indian Story Read Along. And if you like this story, then think about subscribing to this channel. And if you think of any other stories that you might like, and if I have the book, email us and I will definitely read it. All right? We'll see you again next time.